We've never made it up to the balcony for second day Rosh HaShanah, which is a very good sign. I suspect that many of you are here because you heard that our beloved Rabbi Emeritus was going to preach today, and it is so nice to have a full house. And I hope you'll excuse that the clergy want to be able to watch him preach, so we're all going to come into the congregation as well. So it is an honor to have you here, Peter.
It's been just over a year since I stepped aside as senior rabbi of this great congregation. And this is the first time I've given a sermon from this pulpit since then. It feels a little bit like stretching one's atrophied sermonic muscles. I am so grateful to our senior rabbi, Angela Buchdahl, for this opportunity, but most of all for the respect and for the honor she has afforded me as Rabbi Emeritus. And too, it has been that way with all my colleagues, both clergy and professional, who have greeted me and extended hands of friendship no matter where I've been during this past year. I also want to make note of the incomparable lay leadership of this congregation. Friendship seems to transcend times and titles, and it's extraordinary to see so many of them here. They are wonderful, and I know we are all grateful. But especially when I walked around and saw all of you, it is in fact being with you that feels like coming home. And I'm aware of that, and perhaps that's part of the background for this sermon. Because prior to leaving this congregation, I had contemplated what it would mean personally to remove the title and mantle of senior rabbi. With us today, good friends, Ellie and Bonnie Hersha. He stepped aside just in June from Stephen Wise, the senior rabbi, being the senior rabbi of Stephen Wise Synagogue in Los Angeles. We were talking a little bit about what it meant to give up mantle and title. But upon reflection, I realized that life changes can be unsettling without being upsetting. And in fact, they can be vigorously disquieting without being disruptive. Among the benefits of this new chapter is that I've had the opportunity over this past year to consider the broad sweep of all our journeys, no matter what our age or life circumstance, as we move through our personal transitions and challenges and opportunities. David Johnson, a good friend of mine that I met through my work at Auburn Theological Seminary, told me of a day that he spent at a survival training center at an aircraft ditching course. There he learned what to do if you have the unfortunate experience of going down over water. Not a happy way to spend a day. He recounted the story of a Marine, one of 11, who had survived a helicopter crash in the ocean. This Marine had blacked out. In fact, he had broken his back as the helicopter hit the water. When he regained consciousness, the helicopter was sinking, and this Marine was completely disoriented as he was underwater. Two things saved him. One was a small pocket of air from which he was able to take some breaths. But the second is that he had memorized the details of the inside of the cabin of that helicopter. And as he reawakened, he found the handles of the large machine gun, which he knew would lead to the cargo door. Through that cargo door, he knew he could pull himself to safety, and he did, and survived. I've been thinking of reference points because that machine gun for him was a reference point, as was the cargo door. I've been thinking of guideposts, those that have provided me with the stability that I needed when I've been confronted by confounding dilemmas with no simple solutions. And as I prepared this sermon, I felt this significant compulsion to pause, to consider some fundamental beliefs and principles, reference points that have been helpful in tumultuous and confusing times of decision or upset. For me, these are the three upon which I realize I've most significantly counted. 1, we are never alone. 2, nothing is forever. And 3, personal character takes work. Firstly, I'm convinced that we are never alone. For me, it's a matter of faith and ritual. Now, some of us grew up with faith in our homes as children. Some of us grew up with ritual. There may be some of us who had both discussions and practices in their home, and there may be some who had none of it. But ritual connects us to the Jewish life across time, from the past to the future, and also to Jewish life around this globe. Growing up in my family's proudly Reformed Jewish household, I've talked about this. My family celebrated the Shabbat always at home on Friday night. It was a mandate. We had dinners together, lit candles, blessed the wine and the challah. And as a parent, I replicated my childhood family observance, adding one more part of the tradition, that being a blessing of my sons, always with their heads on my shoulder, holding them when they were small enough to hold, and now needing them to bend over a great deal to adjust to my shoulder's height when we're together. But that Shabbat ritual anchored my week as a child and anchored my week as a parent raising children. And I must tell you, it continues to anchor my work week even now, when by ourselves, Carrie and I will put our arms around each other and hold each other as we chant the blessings. And as I do that with her, I remember my parents of blessed memory, and I most dearly think about my grandchildren who now, despite the guilt I've tried to impart, still live across the country. And I feel lovingly embraced by these generations connected to Jews past and to future. Ritual. You and I being here this morning binds us to Jewish life. We are a people that transcend time and transcend geography. As a result, none of us is ever alone. We are not alone when we reach beyond ourselves. We are not alone when we care about the hundreds of thousands now of wandering homeless refugees around this world, remembering that almost all of us are descended from refugees. We are not alone when we care for and about Jews in Paris suffering the sting of anti-Semitism, especially this past year. When they hurt, we hurt. And we care about Jews in Poland trying to reignite Jewish life there. When they build upon memory, we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And we care about Jews in Israel when they worry about the future and well-being of their homeland and their society. When they worry, we may worry even more. The Talmud teaches, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh, that all Israel is responsible for one another, and we are. Intended to embody Jewish peoplehood worldwide, this year 14 communities from Sydney, Australia on the east to Honolulu on the west passed a New Year blessing across every time zone in which there was Jewish life in every continent. It was a celebration of Rosh HaShanah, the kind of celebration that for the first time could bind us through technology to each other, so none of us was ever celebrating alone. Each community passed on the blessing to the next time zone and to the community there with these words: "May we move the world with our commitment and our voice. May those you love live in health, and may there be well-being within your communities and peace in your cities." This blessing was an exquisite expression that we are all linked together around the world as part of the Jewish people. Every ritual, every selfless act of decency that emanates from a Jewish sensitivity implanted in us from the beginning of our Jewish life connects us so indelibly, so powerfully to the miracle of a timeless and global Jewish family. But I also believe that we are not alone because we are a people of God, need I say. For me, my firm belief that God is with us and that if we permit it, we will never be alone. I've previously offered to you and shared my daily prayer, that last line of the Adon Olam, Adonai lev lo ira, God is with me, and I will not be afraid. There were moments this past year, I tell you, when it was that belief and those words alone that strengthened me to take one more step and one more step after that. These were the moments when I was reeling from disorientation, and that reference point saved me. I was so certain that I was not alone, even when I was by myself. I certainly feel that when I placed my hand upon that Torah, which each of us will have the opportunity to do when we have our opportunity to approach the Torah, which this year will be following the Yom Kippur morning service immediately after. Returning the Torah to the ark, we intone these verses from Proverbs, Eitz Chaim Hi L'machazikim Bo. We sung it together today. It is a tree of life to them that hold on to her. In their context, though, these verses do not refer particularly to the Torah, but to matters of mercy and truth and understanding and wisdom, the building blocks of a good life, a worthwhile and purposeful life. A life that is content because we know we've done our best, and when we do our best, we will never be alone. If the Torah is a tree of life, then I imagine that each of us is a unique tree on the branches, a unique leaf on the branches of that tree. Fragile, each one of us alone, but connected and nourished, and together with each other, we form the magnificent canopy of Jewish life. With our Torah, with our people, and with our God, we never be alone. That is a point of reference. My second point of reference is nothing is forever, at least in our lifetime. This is not a dour elegy on life, but rather a hopeful retrenching of our assumptions. Both in our own lives and certainly as a matter of history and international affairs, nothing, I tell you, is forever. In the international realm, consider those of us who are old enough to remember the past assumed truism that the U.S. would never, ever have diplomatic relations with either Cuba or Russia, and how things have changed. The belief that international and national circumstances and interests will remain static, to believe that time stands still and time is not fluid, is an absolute denial of history. a perspective that I think would be helpful whatever your passion for or against the so-called Iran deal. In human life, too, there is little that is forever except, I believe, Jewish existence, well-founded love, and some very, very rare special friendships. And I hope that hatred and anger also not need be forever. Sadly, I have seen in the lives of congregants the terrible result of the determination of siblings and parents and children who have vowed and kept their oath never, ever to speak to each other again. Often the passage of time erodes that ragged sharpness of familial hatred, but not always. Family members go to their grave without a further exchange of words or reconciliation, as you heard today it was with Abraham and Isaac, who never spoke to each other again after the Akedah, the horror of what happened on that mountain. Those of you who read Oliver Sacks's reflection on Shabbat in the New York Times may remember that after spending several months in Israel in 1955 on a kibbutz, Sacks, who died just over 2 weeks ago, decided never, ever to go to Israel again, despite the fact that many of his close cousins who had grown up with him in London had made Aliyah following the Holocaust. But in 2014, just short of 60 years later, Oliver Sacks heard that his cousin Marjorie, his mother's medical protege, was nearing death, and so he called her in Jerusalem to say farewell, he thought. But in a rather unexpectedly strong voice, Marjorie said to him, "Oliver, I have no intention of dying now. I will be having my 100th birthday on June 18th. Will you come?" Without a thought, Sacks said, "Yes, of course I will come," reversing his 60-year-old pledge never again to go to Israel. For Sacks, the concept of never became impermanent. We would do well to pay mind to the prophetic assessment from the well-crafted verses in Ecclesiastes that many of you know by heart. To everything there is a season, a time to every purpose under the heavens, a time to embrace and a time to push away, a time to keep silent and then again a time to talk, a time to love and yes, indeed, perhaps a time to hate. But clearly, according to Ecclesiastes, none of it is forever. It may have its season, but it will pass. There are seasons to our lives. Each of one of these passing seasons is both irreplaceable and especially formative. In the counting of years, whether short or long, our desire is to be able to make decisions which give us some power over the circumstances and quality of our life, I tell you, especially as we age. But life necessitates humility in embracing our mortality because there are limits to our control over our destiny. In his precious and poignant book, Being Mortal, Atul Gawande memorializes what we will all experience and ultimately understand as we get older. He wrote, "We want to be respected and in control of the decisions we can still make. We don't want to sacrifice loyalties or who we are. We have been taught never to accept limitations, but we need to come to terms with the limitations that can't simply be pushed away with illusions and with ill-conceived hopes. this congregation, beginning in January, is going to have a program on planning as one gets older. End-of-life planning run by Rabbi Lev Cohn. It is something that I think we all need to be part of. Along with faith, understanding that nothing is forever has increasingly become, and this is not said with sadness, it has become a frame of reference for me. To everything there is a time and a season, to every purpose under the heavens. Invites us to embrace the limitations of our own power over destiny, and above all, I believe, implores us to be humble in confronting any tendency towards arrogance. It helps me accept, as difficult as it is for me to admit, that I don't know everything, and that I may not be correct when I think I know what others should be doing. An awareness of mortality provides us with a kinder point of reference in judging everyone else as we take a pause to take measure of ourselves. And lastly, the third frame of reference for me is about personal character and how much work that takes. For me, this has been the most challenging guidepost to articulate, and perhaps the most essential. Personal character is the lens through which each of us deliberately makes our decisions. Personal character defines the moral degree of our principles. It defines how we would choose to live our lives and how closely our behavior, even in the smallest way, is aligned with the principles and the person that we would want to be. Just as our parents, at least some of our parents, were examples of what we didn't want to be, our traditional texts are also primers for the appraisal and building of personal character, often by negative example. Just think of it. We learn from Abraham that obsessive faith can be murderous, and that lying can compromise ourselves and our spouses and our families. In the way of personal character, Abraham, I believe, was flawed, as was his grandson Jacob, who stole the birthright and blessing that was legitimately that of his twin brother Esau. And Joseph, the egotist, who set himself above brothers, speaking evil of them to their father, currying favor for himself. And Moses, impatient, spending almost no time with his family. More interested he was in being in the front of the people. For me, the wonder of the Torah is its piercing honesty about human frailty, and then its ensuing mandate that we must all behave better in spite of ourselves. We are not born of impeccable virtue. We are built of what Kant calls the crooked timber of humanity. The Torah's legends and stories mobilize us to do better, be kinder, reflect more deeply, and recognize that, in David Brooks's words, we all have dappled souls. In his wonderful book, The Road to Character, Brooks differentiates between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. You may have read about it. As a rabbi and writer of eulogies, I well know the difference. But you know what? So do you. Resume virtues are the skills that we bring to the job market, that we talk about when we're in public gatherings about the successes that we have earned by virtue of what we can do. But eulogy virtues, the things that are talked about from this pulpit and from others at funerals, those virtues are deeper, more profound, more memorable. In Brooks's words, they are the virtues that exist at the core of your being, whether you are kind, brave, honest, or faithful, what kind of relationships you form. In Faulkner's words, they are the eternal verities. In this season of my life, I find myself often measuring my own character, having fully recognized and accepted my struggle with the crooked timber of my humanity. Especially during this season, but throughout the year, it is essential to pause for one's own self-audit. For me, ashamedly, I came to realize there were times that I hurt people unintentionally with sarcasm in my humor and glib mentions of who they are. It pained me so deeply when I recognized that if ever I could replay a tape, it is those moments I would do again. And those moments when I indicated to my family and to you and others and friends that I really wasn't listening, when I kept glancing at the screen of my iPhone, telling them that they were not as important as some other piece of business. I know there were times when I didn't respond when my family needed me because I was so focused on career and success and on probably less important responsibility. And ego, what a trap that can be. I want my behavior to be aligned with the principles that are precious to me. The thing is that we all struggle with the hope that our descent into the valley of humility will finally lead us to an ascent to personal character. We all want to be better, behave better, do better. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. Ultimately, we hope to depend on our character and humility and moral constitution to shape our behavior, moving us ever closer to the image of the person that we want to be in every circumstance, to have our principles and even those small indications of behavior fully aligned with each other. The prophet Micah hoped for us that we do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. These words of Micah were the quote that accompanied my photo in my high school yearbook. I guess I chose them, which makes me presume I was always being what Micah wanted of us was always my intellectual desire. But at this time of my life, it has become even more my constant passion, the third of my guideposts, my points of reference. I can't tell you that these three are the ones you should have. That's up to you. Each of us needs to define our own reference points to determine our life choices, the way we react to others, and the way we want others to think about us. Those eulogy virtues, which God willing will be far in the future spoken about. But for me, those guideposts are, I'm never alone. It's a tree of life for me. Nothing is forever. To everything there is a season. And personal character takes work to do justly and walk with God humbly. Whatever reference points you choose for yourself, I personally wish you a most meaningful venture in the year ahead. I would pray for all of us that we be noble in our visions, strong in our character, and loving of ourselves with all the blemishes of which we know best of all. Only we know what they are. I would hope that along the way we find our own way in what we hope is a good, if not much better, new year. In that journey, in that search, May we all be blessed. Amen.